preached the same sermon for about 4 weeks in a row. And finally, the chairman of deacons pulled him aside and said, you preached the same one for 4 weeks. He said, well, when you start doing that, and we'll move on to number 2. Last Sunday, we looked at the first part of this wonderful story. We looked at it on Sunday morning. We looked at it Sunday evening about Naaman, the captain of all the armies of Syria, who was a leper, and the little servant girl that had been captured from Israel, that was his slave, his wife's slave actually, was telling him that would God that he was with the prophet that's in Samaria, he would recover him of his leprosy. The king of Syria heard about it and sent letters with Naaman to Israel, to the king of Israel, that you could recover him of leprosy. And the king of Israel said, am I God to kill and to make alive, that he sends to me to recover this man of his leprosy? Leprosy, a disease with no human remedy. Most dreaded thing in biblical times. It's a picture of sin and how it works in the human heart. Elisha the prophet heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, and he sent word to him, send him to me, and he'll find out that there is a prophet in Israel. And so Naaman came to the home of Elisha. Elisha, of course, Naaman all proud and, had all this money brought with him, going to buy the cure and all of this stuff. And he was a, second most powerful man in the world, horses and chariots and all of his men, and he was a great man. And Elisha didn't even come to the door, just snubbed him right from the beginning. Sent his servant Gehazi to go, just tell him, go wash in the Jordan River 7 times and he'll be made clean. And of course, like sin, leprosy, you're never spoken of as being cured of it, but cleansed of it. Sin, you're never spoken of as being cured of it in this life, but you be cleansed from it. There'll always be temptation as long as we're walking on the earth. When we leave here to go be with the Lord, then sin and temptation no longer is a factor. But as long as we're here, we're going to have to struggle with it. So finally, Naaman stomped around and fussed and fumed. I thought he would come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, strike his hand over the place, recover, do a great sensational thing, and then I could go home and brag. Finally, one of his servants said, my father, if the man of God had bid thee do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it? Of course he would have. He wanted to go home and with a story, another little line to add to his resume of all his accomplishments of what he did to get the cleansing. And finally, he cooled down and decided, I don't know what he was thinking, but at least he was thinking, well, I'm already here, might as well do it. That 7th time when he came out of the water, he was clean. And his flesh came again, not like it was before. 40 or 50-year-old guy. His flesh came again like the flesh of a little baby. Made him new. You become a new creature when the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ washes your sins away. No longer is he trying to buy the remedy. He comes back to Elisha and says, let me give you a gift. Take a blessing of your servant. And Elisha says, as the Lord liveth. That's an oath, by the way. I will receive nothing. For one thing, he didn't want it to ever be thought that he was doing this to line his pockets. He also didn't want to confuse the issue that this was totally a free gift of God's grace to do this in this man's life. And so Naaman says, well, can I have some dirt to take back to Syria to build an altar with? I'm only going to worship the real God from now on. So he's left with his 2 mules burden of earth and all of his men and all of his chariots, and they've heard his confession of faith. And Elisha has taken nothing for doing this. So we'll start up now at verse 20, because the story continues, takes a different shift, different tack. Verse 20 of 2 Kings chapter 5. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, and he's talking to himself, "Behold, my master has spared Naaman this Syrian," that's kind of a racial slur on him, "in not receiving at his hands that which he brought. But as the Lord liveth," he swears by, brings God into this, "I will run after him and take somewhat of him." So Gehazi followed after Naaman, and when Naaman saw him running after him, he lighted down from the chariot to meet him and said, "Is all well?" And he said, "All is well. My master has sent me, saying, Behold, even now there be come to me from Mount Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Give them, I pray thee, a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments." And Naaman said, "Be content, take 2 talents. And he urged him, and I bet he didn't have to urge him real hard. He urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags. Now that's 24 pounds of silver. And 2 changes of garments. And laid them upon 2 of his servants, and they carried them before him. When he came to the tower, which is there where Elisha is, he took them from their hand and bestowed them in the house. Then he let the men go, and they departed. See, he's trying not to let Elisha see what's happening. But he went in and stood before his master, and Elisha said unto him, "Whence comest thou?" That is, where have you been, Gehazi? And he said, "Thy servant went nowhere." And he said unto him, "Went not my heart with thee when the man turned again from his chariot to meet thee? Is it a time to receive money and to receive garments and olive yards and vineyards and sheep and oxen and men servants and maid servants?" You see, Elisha knows Gehazi, all he's done, but he also knows where Gehazi's heart is and what his dreams are. They're all about money and wealth and power. Verse 27. Elisha continues, "The leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto thee, and unto thy seed," your children, "forever." And he went out from his presence a leper, white as snow. It has been truly said that the essence of poverty is to value one's wealth in terms of money. The essence of poverty is to value one's wealth in terms of money. Money in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. Money can be used for good purposes. Money has a legitimate use and a legitimate place. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount said, "Take no thought for your body, what you shall eat or what you shall drink or what you shall put on. For after all these things the heathen, the nations, the unsaved seek. But your heavenly Father knoweth that you have need of these things. But seek ye first the reign, the kingship, literally, of God, and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." The problem with money is if we're not careful, instead of us having it, it'll have us. Like the man that was on the ship and he wore this money belt and had all this gold coinage in there. And then the ship went down and the man jumped in the water to swim to the lifeboat and glub, glub, glub to the bottom because the money had him. I want to talk to you today about the greed of Gehazi. The greed of Gehazi. It was his undoing. A fatal mistake to view the things we can touch and taste and see and hear and smell, to consider that those are the ultimately real things. The Apostle Paul said the things that are unseen are the real things. The things that are seen are the temporal things. Every person on earth, whether a Christian or anything else, every person on earth is just passing through. And we're not going to take anything with us when we leave. The only thing you can take with you when you leave, if you're going to heaven because you've received Jesus Christ as Lord, you know what you can take to heaven with you? You can take somebody else. But that's all. And if you're going to heaven, when you get there, you won't need any of this stuff. I can tell you that right now. The worst stuff there is better than the best stuff here. But how many people are deceived, even professing Christians, into thinking that they can, well, I've got my fire insurance policy against hell. But I might as well have all of this down here I can have too. Jesus had quite a bit to say about that, didn't he? Again, from Matthew 6. No man can serve two masters. He'll either love the one and hate the other, or cleave to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and material things. We can't do both. You might can drive a truck and ride a motorcycle, but you can't do both at the same time. If you can, I'd love to see you try in a big parking lot with nobody else out there. Think about Gehazi. And greed got him right out from under Elisha's nose. Here is Elisha, the prophet in Israel. And just one of the great miracles. By the way, remember when Elijah, his predecessor, went up to heaven in a chariot of fire pulled by horses of fire? And just before that happened, Elijah had said to Elisha, who had been the servant in that role to Elijah, "What can I do for you?" He said, "Oh, that a double portion of your spirit be upon me." Well, here's Gehazi, who's in line for the same thing to happen with Elisha to him. Interestingly, you read the story of Elijah and then read the story of Elisha. There are exactly twice as many miracle stories in the Elisha accounts as there are in the Elijah accounts. It actually happened twice as much. Twice. Double portion of the Spirit. Double portion of the miraculous in his ministry. And here's Gehazi. Just think, could have been twice as many with him. But there he was. The greed of Gehazi. 4 things I want us to look at with regard to Gehazi. Number 1, his squandered privilege. He was not one of the servants of Elisha. He was the servant of Elisha. He was the understudy. He was the apprentice prophet. There were other prophets who were in training. Well, you can read about them in the very next chapter. They go to build them a little seaside seminary by the Jordan River where they can study and pray. There's a bunch of them. But out of all of those, Gehazi has been chosen by Elisha. What a privilege. You know, Jesus said, I think it's in Luke 12:48, to whom much is given, of him shall much be required. Gehazi had a great privilege. He has witnessed several miraculous things through the ministry of Elisha, and that very day saw a leper, no human remedy for leprosy, saw this leper who came out of the water and his skin was like baby skin. And he was clean. And that just did not happen in that day and time. The only time in the Bible you read about a person being cleansed of leprosy is when a miracle happened. And just in case it were to happen, of course God knew there were going to be some instances of this. So they put in Leviticus 13 and 14 how there was the ritual for restoring that person to society if it ever happened. But it only happened a very few times because there are only a very few miraculous times that God restored and cleansed a leper. If I'm not mistaken, this is the only occasion in the Old Testament where it happened. With Elisha. And there Gehazi has seen the whole thing, and it's gone right by him. Because he's looking at all of that money and changes of clothes, the wardrobe and all this stuff that Naaman brought to try to buy the cleansing. And Elisha didn't even take any of that when he wanted to give it to him. We see his squandered privilege. He was the servant of Elisha. You know, when Gehazi met the Lord face to face, as we all will, and the Lord said to him, you had all this privilege. What potential Elisha saw in you. He chose you because he saw in you that you could become a wonderful representative of the Lord. But you chose money instead of the master. You chose greed instead of godliness. You chose the things of this world instead of the things that truly last. What a privilege. What potential he had that squandered. Then he was the servant of Elisha and got to hear everything Elisha said. I mean, he's the one that ran ahead a chapter earlier when the little boy that Elisha promised to that lady who built the little house on the top of the wall so that when Elisha traveled through, they'd have a place to stand and to stay, and they put a bed and a candlestick and a chair in there. And Elisha says, what can I do for you? And she says, I have everything I need. And Gehazi said, she doesn't have any children. And so Elisha says, about this time next year, according to the time of life, you'll have a son. Sure enough, she had a little boy. And then when he was old enough to be weaned and to tag along with his daddy, it was during barley harvest. And he was out in the field, and it might have been something like a sunstroke or something hit him. And he cried out, my head, my head. And one of the servants took him home, and he laid in his mama's lap till lunchtime and then died. She hitched up the team and got her servant to go with her and drive, and they went all the way to Mount Carmel, which is over near the seacoast in the northwestern corner of Israel. Long trip. And Elisha said, it looks like that Shunammite lady. And Gehazi, go see what she wants. And he went and met her. And then she came and grabbed Elisha by the feet and said, "Did I ask for a child to have him taken away?" He sent Gehazi, "Take my staff and run ahead of us. We'll come as quick as we can, but you run ahead. Lay my staff on the child." Gehazi went ahead. They came with the wagon and the team. Gehazi laid his staff on the child. Nothing happened. He probably tried it several times. They finally got there. Elisha went up into the room. And he prayed. And he laid down on top of that little bitty boy. Stretched himself on him. Put his hands on his hands. His eyes on his eyes. And laid on. And the child got warm. Got up and walked around the room. Came back and laid on him again. And the child sneezed 7 times. And woke up. And Elisha said, "Gehazi, go get his mama." And she came up and got him. Gehazi was there and saw the dead brought back to life. Gehazi saw the leper cleansed. Gehazi was there before that when the armies were dying of thirst. And Elisha said, "Dig ditches in the middle of this valley." And the last thing you want to do when you haven't got any water is dig ditches in hot weather. They dug ditches and the Lord made it rain up in the mountains, and it ran down and filled up the ditches. And then they went on to battle and had victory. Gehazi has had the privilege of seeing and being part of all of these things. But yet greed got him in the end. The Apostle Paul mentions those who have made shipwreck of their Christian life. That's Gehazi. There's a reason why in what's called the little apocalypse, Jesus' teachings concerning end times in Mark 13, there's one little verse, shortest one in that whole chapter. "But he that endureth to the end, the same shall be saved." You see, saving faith is not just faith that starts well. Saving faith's about ending well. There's lots of cars that start the race, but they don't all finish. You don't win if you don't cross the finish line. That's why in Hebrews 12, 1 and 2, we're told, "Wherefore, seeing we are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let's lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that's set before us, looking unto Jesus," He's at the finish line, "the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy set before Him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God." We want to finish well. And all those who finished well before us are in the grandstands cheering us on, urging us on. And every time a victorious believer leaves from here to go be with the Lord, another seat is filled in that grandstand. Gehazi forgot all about those things. His mind got filled with silver and changes of clothes. And what was it that Elisha said? Is it time to receive money and garments and olive orchards and vineyards and sheep and oxen and all of this? In the first grade, in Miss Blanche's class, there's about, 35 or 36 of us little kids. That was before they even had a teaching assistant. She had us all by herself. She had a song for everything. She had a song about eating your vegetables. The way she checked roll in the morning, she had us march around the room when she had a record player that played this march, you know. And as we passed by, she'd say, okay, there's that old David Burris, you know. She'd check us out, but it kept us busy and kept our hands to ourselves and stuff during that time. We were coming back from the lunchroom one day. No, maybe we were going to the lunchroom. And somehow the rumor got out in the class. She had all these little things that she used for object lessons with us, you know, when she was teaching us to read. There wasn't kindergarten. First grade was when you started. She had all these little things, and there was this little jar. It was rumored that jar was full of money. And the rumor got out that as soon as we got back from lunch, we were going to divide up the money that's in the jar. A lot of things I don't remember, but I do remember David Cagle and myself were next to each other in line. In fact, in line, she didn't line us single file. She lined us double file, made us hold hands. That way we looked after each other. And the line was shorter. She'd keep up with us better, I guess. He and I, what you going to do with that? I wonder how much money's in there. I wonder what, I'm going to get me a BB gun and a bicycle. I had all this envision, and there wasn't no money in that jar. Or we didn't get any anyway. But that's Gehazi. He's been thinking about that silver and them changes of clothes, and I'm going to get me some olive orchards and some vineyards, and I'm going to have me some servants. And I'm going to say, go do this and run do that and bring me one of them. And I'm going to be the boss. Yeah. And you know, if I'm like, just think what a great ministry I could have if I was really somebody in this world. There's all kind of ways we can rationalize. You know, I can talk myself into anything I want to do. I really can. I can talk myself out of anything I don't want to do. I really can. I have 2 lists of things that I do. This is my ought to list, and this is my want to list. Guess which list I like the best? Guess which one is easier to get done? You know what? The Christian life is really, a lot of it is about making my ought to list be the same as my want to list. You know, if my want to list was really my ought to list, I wouldn't have too much struggle, would I? And the Christian life is about getting them closer together to where they overlap, and finally, hopefully, one day, I'll be in the presence of Jesus then when they all match up. But Gehazi's want to list is way yonder. It's on the other side of the world from his ought to list. We've seen his privilege. You know, the other thing, he's a servant of Elisha, but he is in line to be the successor of Elisha's ministry. Just like Elisha was the successor in Elijah's ministry. What a legacy. What an opportunity to be in line, the third one in those 3 guys. Even though his name didn't rhyme with Elijah and Elisha. But it could have been, just think how the Bible might have read. Elijah, the stories of Elijah and Elisha, and then Gehazi, and all the people might have been blessed, and all the countries might have been reached out to, and all the people that might have trusted in the Lord, and all the temptations and stuff that people might have avoided, and judgments of God that might not have come upon the nation. All of that stuff. And with Gehazi's choice here, all of that is wiped away. Now, Gehazi is not thinking that way. He's not thinking, if I let this greed get hold of me, I'm going to forfeit the ministry that God has maybe planned for me to have, and all those people that I could have helped are going to go unhelped. He didn't think about any of that. He's only thinking of himself and right now and what he wants. Most people walking around on this planet are thinking about themselves right now and what they want. That ain't much different than the animals. The fact is, it shouldn't surprise us that people act more like animals than animals today. Because that's the way people think. We see his squandered privilege. Secondly, we see his scornful pride. He doesn't think highly of anybody except himself. Look what he says. He's talking to himself, but we know what he said. God heard him. And Elisha knew. So, verse 20. We're still in the first verse. We're not going to examine every one this in detail. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, don't forget, Elisha is a real man of God. He says, behold, my master has spared Naaman, this Syrian, in not receiving in his hands that which he brought. Look what he thought of Naaman. He calls him Naaman, this Syrian. Looks down on him because he's a Gentile from another country. Gehazi thinks he's better than that man. That old Syrian. Elisha wouldn't even take money from that old Syrian. Scornful pride. He has no compassion in his heart for Naaman. He's not joyful at all. Boy, Naaman's getting to go back and live a good life and get to be with his wife and his family and get to be productive and all the potential that's been put in his life that he couldn't have done while he was a leper. No thankfulness, no compassion, no concern for Naaman. But it gets worse. We see how he saw Naaman. We see how he saw Elisha, who is the man of God. Notice what he said. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, and it all comes out in how you emphasize reading this. He says, behold, my master has spared Naaman, this Syrian, in not receiving in his hands that which he brought. As the Lord liveth, I will follow him and take something from him. My master. He doesn't think too highly of Elisha either. Elisha doesn't share Gehazi's value system. There are people in this world who do not share the value system that you and I have in recognizing that the real valuable things are not tangible, marketable, material kinds of things, the real valuable things. I'll tell you what. Now, if you didn't know it before, this will be a revelation to you, but you probably already knew I like to fish, okay? And I'm out in my boat on this lake, and there are all kind of houses around that lake. There are some that are about this far apart and not very big. Now you pay full price for those things. But then every once in a while there are these big mansions with about a 5-acre lot, and the house fills up most of the 5 acres. You know what? Those people get sick too. Those people have loved ones that have tragic things happen to them also. Those people may be radiant, glowing Christians, and God's blessed them with those things, but the wealth doesn't buy them anything with what really matters. Speaking of only this worldly perspective, what kind of value can you put on having good health? That's worth a lot. What kind of value can you have on having a good marriage? Or having good parents? Having good children? Having good relationships with people? Having real friends? That's where the wealth is in this world. All that stuff. We have kind of downsized. You know why? I don't want to keep up with too much stuff as I get older. One of the biggest blessings in the long term that we ever had was a fire. The neighbor that owned land next to us over near Foxfire they was harvesting pine straw, and the guys was burning the pine cones and stuff, and that fire got out and burned up our storage building. It had all that stuff. Some of it I wish I could have picked through and saved a thing or two maybe, but that man's insurance took care of us, took good care of us. We'd have never sold all that junk in that building and got the full value for it. Plus, my daughter's not going to have to pick through all that stuff one day and think, what was Daddy thinking in keeping this? You know? Oh. Gehazi sees himself as much smarter than Elisha. And I can promise you this, there's a lot more people that know the name Elisha than there are that know the name Gehazi. Right. If I'd have told you this morning, let's turn to Gehazi today and talk about him, we'd still be turning. If you told me that, I might still be. We see how he saw himself. Elisha's not very smart. Naaman is an old Syrian. But he says, as the Lord living, I will run after Naaman and take something from him. He thinks he's pretty sharp. Elisha missed a chance to have all this wealth. Naaman, this old Syrian, he shouldn't have it. I should have it. We see how he thinks of God too. He pulls God right into this. He swears an oath by the Lord. As the Lord liveth. God's going to be pleased with me. He ought to be pleased with me because I'm smarter than others. How we view ourselves reveals whether we have a high view of God or not. We shouldn't think much of ourselves if our God is very much. Humility is the first step towards spirituality. We see his scornful pride. And then we see his secret plan. He thought it was a secret. There ain't no secrets. Let me just tell you, there are no secrets. The Lord knows every one of them. Jesus said something, I think it's in Mark 13, about what's whispered in the closet be shouted from the rooftop. Of course, you know, on Judgment Day, I'll know who did all the breaking in our house. But I won't care. It won't matter. But there are no secrets. We see a secret plan. I put secret in quotes. Notice it was quickly devised. Naaman hadn't even got out of sight. And Gehazi says, I'm going to do this. And as the Lord lives, I'm going to chase him down. I'm going to get some money. We better be careful when we act in haste. We might do the wrong thing. There is a reason. I didn't know this. I thought my daddy was just getting old. But my daddy got slower as he got older. There's a good reason for this. We need to move a little bit slower on things when we're young. And when I was young, I knew so much more. And I moved so much faster. And I got in so much more trouble. He moved too fast. His plan was quickly devised. And when you come up with something that fast, there's going to be a flaw in it. His secret plan was quickly devised, quickly deployed. He said, I'm going to do this. And he jumped into action, running after him. I hate to say this, but that might have been the hardest he's worked in a good while. You know, there's people that'll work hard to do something dishonest when they could just get them a job making minimum wage, be a lot better off and not have to look over their shoulder all the time and get a crick in their neck. We moved back here to start a church in 2007, and we went through about 3 or 4 landline phones in the first 6 months. Every time lightning struck anywhere around, it'd come and burn that phone up. And we bought 3 or 4, and we finally decided we'll just use our cell phones. I found out later the reason that happened was because some people came down the highway we lived on. One of them on the back of a truck with an axe and chopped the ground wire on every power pole, and they'd rip the copper out and go on to the next one. And none of the power poles was grounded. That's work doing that for a little bit of copper. It's like you'd rather climb a tree and tell a lie than stand on the ground and tell the truth. You know, I mean, it's just some things do not make sense to me. He went right after it. Quickly devised, quickly deployed, quickly destroyed. Just as quick as he put that plan into action and got the stuff and got back with it, he didn't have that silver or those clothes any time at all. Elisha knew all about it, and he left from there, not with a bunch of money and clothes. He left from there with leprosy. We'll finish this tonight. But there's enough right now for you to get the drift of where this is going. The point of it all is that material wealth is not a sign at all that God is pleased with you. You can't use that as a barometer. It's kind of neutral, really. There are some people that are good and godly and faithful people that God has blessed. And they tend to use it to be a blessing. Remember Abraham this morning? And God promised him he'd be a blessing. And he was generous to his nephew. There are other people that have the philosophy of that guy in Luke 12 that we know as the rich fool, whose philosophy was get all you can and can all you get. And God called him a fool. The real question is not. It's not really, do you believe Jesus is the Son of God? It's not really, do you believe He died on the cross? Or even that you believe He rose from the dead? The real question is, are you willing to let Him be your Lord? That's your slave owner. That's the question. And see, you can't have material things be your top value or be your value and have Him be your value too. Gehazi had made his choice in his heart sometime before Naaman came. And when he got the opportunity to express what his real God was, it came out when he chased after Naaman. What is it? Who is it Where is it that has control in your life? That is the question. It's not too late to change your answer. But final jeopardy is coming. And you're going to be stuck with what your response has been. If you want to change your answer to let Jesus Christ be the Lord of everything and central to everything and in control of everything in your life, you have the chance to do that today. And any real commitment that's made in here will also be made public. And I'm here to help you do that as we stand and sing.